And we are live. It is 8 minutes past 5 a.m. and it's day 466, I believe, that we are up and running. It is, let's check, 9 degrees outside, so it is nice and fresh, and that means when I do get to go for my walk, it is going to be a wonderful morning. But right now, we're going to start off with some mobility and a chat about health and fitness. And then we're going to go off for a walk. We're going to do 35 seconds intervals on the mobility timers, 5 seconds to change. And we're just going to go through a series of mobility exercises as we chat a little bit and get started with the day. For those of you who are watching, my name is Toby. I am 41 years old and I train to live an active, self-sufficient and adventurous life. I do so by minding my sleep, minding what I eat, trying to get sufficient movement, trying to build good relationships, and trying to be a part of different communities. I try to sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. Last night was more than 7 hours, so that would be a good night. I try to eat within my energy balance because I want to maintain my current weight. So try to eat within 2200 calories as a goal. Try to eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of fibers, a lot of micronutrients. A lot of healthy, whole, freshly prepared foods whenever possible. And to support my strength and muscle building goals, I try to eat sufficient protein. And I still haven't decided which direction I'm going to swing in terms of what sufficient protein means, whether that is, as some longevity doctors suggest, 0.32 to 0.36 grams per kilogram of body weight, or whether that is closer to the 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. Because my experience tells me that the second one does help me grow and build muscle. We're going to have to understand better what the lower amount of protein will do for my muscle volume and strength goals. YouTube Punk, good morning. Thanks for dropping by, saying hi. I hope life is treating you well in Texas. And I hope you're having a good start of the day where you're at. But I think for you it's the end of the day. So So I hope you're having a good end of the day and that you will have a good start of the day tomorrow after a good night of sleep. How was the weekend? Right? So beyond nutrition, we generally try to show up to do some exercise, which could be strength training, it could be conditioning training, it could be strength conditioning training, it could be endurance, it could be a HIIT. It's usually a mix, except for Sundays when I go running. It could be mobility, but what the main idea is that outside of having active days that involve at least 3 hours of movement, a part of those 3 hours, 30 to 60 minutes, is dedicated exercise. So I'd like to be physically active more throughout the day in terms of not sitting but walking, not just sitting but trying to do a bit more physical activity, because movement and activity that gets the heart rate up to about 50-60% is what we need a bit more of throughout the day. Sitting definitely doesn't make that happen. And then on top of that, I try to do 30 minutes of dedicated strength or conditioning exercise to build a better base of health and fitness, of physical ability. We're just going to do this one again. And then in that mix, I would like to add some fun and play, so a sport once or twice a week that is not individual, but that is with other people. I've expressed that desire now for the last half year. It's the moment my family schedule will allow it, we can start focusing on that and making that happen. I appreciate that. How about you? Been keeping up with your training in Texas? Life's been treating you well? And who's dropped by? Let's see. This is Michelle. Thanks for dropping by, saying hi. I hope you're doing alright. I hope you're having a good start or end of the day. And I appreciate you dropping by and leaving a note in the chat. I hope you're well where you are in the world. We're just cycling through some mobility before I go out for a walk this morning at dawn. You know what the biggest problem is right now? It's because I injured my back a bit over 2.5 weeks ago. It is just annoying and irritating to not be able to work with loads because I want to give my back and spine, nervous system, muscles a proper chance to heal. But we were building up proper strength endurance and endurance with the swing program that we really do need to realize that simply mobility and walking is good, but I do need to get back to building muscle power and strength for life in general. We'll get there. Because the most important thing is that the spine heals itself. Alright, so we're talking about different modalities of training, all serving the same purpose slightly differently, and that is to live a long, active, self-sufficient, and healthy life. And that's just something that I am trying to steadily work towards and make happen. And I think we're in a good spot and rhythm right now, but it's taken a while to figure that out. So if you're interested in that, you can simply, subscribe to my channel, drop by and stream once in a while, and as we continue training, we can look at the different aspects and challenges that living a long and healthy life brings with it. Cat and cow. Now, outside of sleeping well, so trying to get those 7 to 9 hours a night, eating well, and moving sufficiently, I also think it's important to consider the relationships we cultivate. So, investing mostly directly into my family, my wife and children, relatives, but then also good friendships that we need to cultivate and be a part of. Been active. Good. I think getting the sleep schedule in is important Odds of life. Thanks for dropping by, saying hi. I hope you're well where you're at in the world. This is a stream about health and fitness. This is my morning routine, morning workout. It is 5:30, 5:20 a.m. where I'm at. Working on my mobility before I go out on a walk. Thanks for dropping by. And I hope you're having a good day, good start of the day or end of the day, depending on where you're at. For me, it's the start of the day, but I know for some people it's the end of the day. They're winding down, getting ready for bed and a good night's sleep. And YouTube Punk, good that you're getting your sleep schedule back to normal. Sometimes life happens and we can't stick to our schedules. That's why it's important to take that long-term view. Don't look at things on the basis of a day or a week, but think more in terms of months and years and decades. And there we can see that having an interrupted night of sleep once in a while isn't going to be avoidable at all. Now, that being said, right, investing in friendships and relationships is important because through our relationships we define and understand the world and ourselves in it. So it's good to have friends and family, people we can rely on, and people we can trust and turn to in our life. So just keep that in mind and see that as a part of cultivating a healthy life. The same as in terms of the communities we're part of. These communities are, the street we live in, the school our children go to, the sports clubs we participate in, the workplace we're a part of, all just different communities. That's important too. Participate and contribute. So, if you're mindful of all of those things, then generally that's a relatively solid basis for a good and healthy life. And anything on top of that is probably going to be a bonus. Right? And let's just be clear that there aren't any guarantees. Nothing is a given. I'm a Keep It Real. Thanks for dropping by and thanks for the support. Hope you're doing well. YouTube Punk, odds, you ever seen someone? Well, I think sometimes people are browsing and they find things that they can't place in life. They have questions, and we answer the questions, right? And we help them on their way. I think in life we meet a lot of people, especially in digital space, And there are different types of interactions there. Um, Generally, I assume people have good intention, even when they formulate questions in a way that might not reflect that. Um, so it's also something we learn throughout life, wouldn't you say? Um, so if we're doing those basics, we're generally setting ourselves up for a good and healthy life. But there are no guarantees, right? I mean, the fact that lifespan is increasing to 86, at least where I'm at, has increased to about 86. That's great. That means there are people who are getting older than 86. There are people who are dying younger than 86, right? So that's important to keep in mind, that there is this discrepancy there that we want to be mindful of when we live a healthy life. We are doing that with the understanding that there aren't any guarantees. We might be lowering the risks that stem from diseases and discomforts and ailments from preventable causes. But there are also many, 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 many risks that we cannot mitigate. By that I mean, I could do everything right and still turn 50 and die unexpectedly, develop any number of diseases or conditions, and there would be nothing in the world I could have done to stop that. But the chances of me reaching 80 and being able and capable, right, those increase by the uh, um, by the by the amount of work that I'm doing and putting in. Maybe I'm a bit naive. You have a bit more experience with streams and people on the internet than I do. Did I tell you about the huge number of trolls that I had on the stream? What was it, Saturday morning, I think? So maybe my assumption of good intent online isn't as appropriate as it should be. But still, I can't change the way I am. So just understanding that probably will lead us to good insights on where we can make minor improvements in life to live longer, happier, and healthier. All right, I'm about to go make myself a cup of coffee. So if you have any questions about my health and fitness journey, if you want to talk about anything in specific, you go ahead and you let me know, because then we can dive into something. Otherwise, I'll probably talk about walks and low impact training versus higher impact training, and why variation is key. And how that can help us. I'm going to come over and read your messages in a second, buddy. Yeah, I know you would have. I think you would have had a field day, because there were some really weird things. And I think the week before, I don't know, maybe it's something to do with the day. A lot more bored people online Friday nights or something. There was one, I blocked like 6 trolls, and then the 7th one, I said, "It's me, it's the same guy you keep blocking." So I think someone really didn't have anything better to do and just kept showing up with each of his accounts, which I think was hilarious and funny, if true. So hey, here we are, about to move on to a cup of coffee, and then from that cup of coffee, we're going to move on to a walk at dawn. It's going to be great. It's already been a pretty good and decent start of the day, I have to say. So, there we go. And I would like to think that I did everything I wanted to do in terms of mobility this morning. Wow. Right? Wouldn't you say? That's quite a thing. All right, we're gonna twist the camera for a moment. Let's see, can you see past all the fruits? There. So we have, you can see it like this. Quite a lot of fruits and vegetables lying out. And I will be standing right behind them. Thought this morning I wouldn't move them all, but I would just leave them up there so that we could look past them and see what that's like. Let's see. Here, I'm just going to toss on the sweater, so don't mind the noise too much. Hello, there we are. I think it's always Saturday morning. Yeah, cherry tomatoes are one of my favorite kind of tomatoes, actually. Ooh, there we are. Good morning. All right, we are now in the kitchen. So if you're wondering where I'm doing all of my getting healthy and fit, you now have your answer. It is at home in the kitchen. And I'm just gonna close the door to the washroom and garage out back. So let's see, what am I making? I am making a foamed up soy milk. Let's call it a soy milk cappuccino. A little bit of calories. I'm just going to introduce that. And a good shot of espresso. It's back to cooking with Toby. Well, you know, I really enjoyed this format, and I have the feeling that quite a lot of people do. So I'm trying to bring it back, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it every day because it's a bit time intensive. But I think having a chat during the workout and while we make the coffee is a pretty decent and good way to go. I think maybe in the future we'll switch from me talking during the workout to actually just a workout flow. And maybe we'll even switch to a horizontal stream instead of vertical, and then switching to a vertical stream over a cup of coffee in the kitchen. But anyway, hey, 5:38. So we can spare 10 minutes for a cup of coffee and a chat, friends. So let's talk a bit about different intensities of workouts and why they matter. And I'll start off by saying that any type of workout program that we're thinking about, we really need to reconsider what our goals are, right? I think that is an important one to keep top of mind. And if you have any questions, by the way, about different workout modalities, now would be a great time to ask, because we're here and we're going to talk about them. When we think about any type of workout, we need to think about our goals. So right now, my main goal is to give my back the time to recover while maintaining my weight and maintaining as much as my conditioning as I possibly can. I know I'm making a trade-off with strength because I'm not going to be lifting any loads for the foreseeable future, but I don't want to lose all of my conditioning. So in that, I'm making very specific choices in my overall workout schedule in intensity and the types of things that I am and capable and able to do. So the goal comes first, right? If we have a powerlifting goal or a strength goal or a personal record goal or a mileage goal or a time to distance goal or a you know a competitive goal, those will inform different modalities of training that we're going to pick from. For general health and fitness, right, sufficient movement is the key. So the different types of modalities in and of themselves don't matter, but they trigger different adaptations and outcomes for our general health and fitness. All right, so for example, doing 200 kettlebell swings with a 16 kilo kettlebell is strength and conditioning, meaning that I'm building the strength but also the endurance conditioning to actually tax my muscles for about 10 minutes at intervals. Whereas if I'm lifting a 20 kilo kettlebell without hurting my back and, for example, pressing that or swinging that or 24 swinging that 3 to 5 times, I'm working purely on strength. If I'm picking up a lighter kettlebell and I'm swinging that 100 times consecutively, because that is also possible, then I'm working more on conditioning in that sense. All right. And this trigger different adaptations in the body, so that will result in a different general outcome for me over time. But for general health and fitness, and it's important to understand and realize what we are working on or trying to work on for general health and fitness. If we are moving, we're already investing in our health and fitness, right? If we are moving at a pace where our heart rate goes up to about 50 or 60% of what it can be at the max, we're already exercising. But what kind of mix are we looking for? Well, we want to keep our heart and cardiovascular system healthy. So we want to do some cardiovascular exercise. This could be walking, this could be running, this could be biking, this could be swimming, this could be skiing, this could be endurance, or this could be HIIT, right? So you could do short interval bursts with a pause in between and then repeat those a couple of times. I think Tabata is a popular format, or you could go for a longer term, like consecutive 30, 60, 90 minutes walks or runs or bike rides to get the similar benefits. Yeah, so those are the ways that we can work on our endurance cardiovascular health. We could also be interested in building more muscle mass, and I think it's a common misconception that muscle mass and strength are the same thing. They go hand in hand, they're related, but training for hypertrophy or training which is muscle growth versus training for strength can be done in similar and different ways, right? So training for hypertrophy, getting as close to failure as possible, don't have to train to failure, getting those repetitions in, building that volume, and then eating right on top of that to build that muscle. And there are people who know a lot more about this than I do. And then there is building strength, where we, same way, bring our body to heavier loads over time, but we are not necessarily focused on doing that in a way that increases the muscle volume as much, but you will build more muscle, a bit more muscle tissue over time. And then there's also the variation between general just movement versus making it yeah, that's a very good question. As I'm talking about it, I think I need to go back to my syllabus on functional movement and strength coaching to read up on exactly what the difference is, because I don't have it top of mind ready right now. I know there's a difference, but I can't explain what the difference is, because I think some people want to be stronger and not necessarily bigger, right? That's where the question comes from. That's also one of my goals. I would like to have a bit more muscle volume, but I don't necessarily want to be a lot bigger than I am today, but I do want to be as strong as I can be. I think mountain climbing or bouldering is a good example. Someone who's physically very strong. I appreciate the question. It also helps me think this through. I'm not an expert, right? I'm just someone who enjoys the conversation about health and fitness, and this helps me think that through. Actually, I can just check my notes. What is the difference in training for muscle growth versus strength movement? Let's see what the what my notebook says. Muscle growth is influenced by mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. Higher training volumes are correlated with increased hypertrophy. Whereas strength development requires progressive overload, but I thought that also was true for muscle growth. And you want to do more intensity, so above 80% of your 1 rep max. And repetition ranges of 1 to 6 are usually associated with strength, whereas repetition ranges of 8 to 12 are often recommended for hypertrophy. Well, that's a quick summary, but I guess I need to read up a bit more to make sense of that answer in the context of the difference between strength and hypertrophy. So working towards that, I think is it's important to understand that there are differences and that we make specific choices in how we train for those different outcomes. And so basically have endurance, HIIT, hypertrophy, strength, strength conditioning, right, and mobility as types of training. And each leads to different outcomes. Mobility leads to um, a greater range of motion and more freedom of movement in our day-to-day life, perhaps. Right, so worth thinking about that. When I go on walks, I'm engaging in low intensity workout. My heart rate will usually stay below zone 2, so zone 1, but I can push that into zone 2, which means that it is on par with a slightly longer term, slightly more intense long run, right? Because the heart rate is in the same range or zone. The thing about those heart rates and zones is that they're quite fluid. If you listen to them enough, I know there's been a lot of talk about zone 2 and VO2 max, right? Increasing VO2 max versus building that broad base with zone 2. But generally, for general health and fitness, actually cycling through those zones through different training modalities is probably going to be very beneficial, because it can be good for your health to max out once in a while and max out a couple of times and see where that limit lies, but also build that ability to reach that limit. But it can also be beneficial for your body to, over a longer period of time, work at a slightly higher intensity to become more efficient and to create those adaptations that give you the general strength and stamina to perform, right? So for general health, unless we have very specific goals, I would say understanding all those different training modalities is one thing. Understanding that different goals will help us pick different training modalities. But there is no harm in, over the course of 2 weeks, on top of a steady base, right? Like one endurance session, one strength session, actually having one or two varying sessions where sometimes we're doing a HIIT training where we're working on that VO2 max, whereas other times we're doing strength conditioning where we're kind of trying to fatigue our muscles with lighter weights, but building the capacity to work more and more over longer periods of time, because you never know what life's going to have in store for you. And Frank Affa, I guess, but I guess that would depend on the goal, and on what you're trying to accomplish, right? I don't know, because increased cortisol. Ooh, wow, that's a very specific question, especially asking someone who's having their cup of morning coffee. I haven't thought about it. I can be very honest about that. So it's going to be hard for me to have an answer. I heard yesterday on a podcast about health and fitness that coffee drinking is actually healthy and good for us. So it does have some benefits, but like everything, things have benefits and trade-offs that we need to be aware of. And we need to be mindful of that in the choice we make. Green tea is better than coffee or something like that, but coffee is good as well. Um, but that's the extent of my knowledge about it. In any case, if we understand that we have different goals, different training modalities to reach different goals, but can employ a general mix of those training modalities for general health and fitness, then I think that's a good point to end today's conversation. And Frank Affa, I appreciate you dropping by, saying hi. YouTube Punk, I appreciate you spending the morning with me, or the evening before bed, for the conversation. And let's see, everyone else. I'm a Keep It Real, Odds of Life. Michelle, thanks for dropping by, saying hi. Be well, stay well. Remember, this is about the way I feel, not about the way I look. I want to feel fit, capable, and competent for life. And the way I do that is by showing up and thinking about my sleep, my nutrition, my movement, my relationships, and my communities. We're good just the way we are. We've got to love ourselves before we can move on. And the only way to get anything done, friends, is by showing up and doing the work. So that means that I will see you tomorrow. And remember, friends, subscribe. Take care.